right. We are live. Oh, I can't see you. Transition. There we go.
You see me now?
There we go. Okay. We are good. Turn that down. Okay, hold on. I'm getting feedback. This is on. Hold on. Okay. All right, my laptop was playing for some reason. All right, sorry about that. There's always something to learn here as I do this. This is like my, fourth time. All right.
Well, this is what happens when you have live radio going on.
Yeah,
man.
and I've got no one to help me. So I need like two more hands and I'd be set. So how are you today? We've got to make this. We're on a tight schedule because you've got a 1:45. So we're gonna get moving here. But everything's been good.
Everything's been good with me, man. I have been enjoying my summer, getting ready for football season.
Yeah.
And weekends will be pretty busy with my wife and I traveling to watch my son play football.
That's right. So he's where now?
He's at a junior college in Miami, Oklahoma.
Gotcha.
Now it's spelled just like Miami,
right? But you can't.
In Oklahoma, they make it Miami. They have to have that twang to it, I guess.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Where is that in relation to Oklahoma City? North, south, east, west?
That's going to be north of Oklahoma City.
Okay.
Yeah. It's kind of northeast. It's up around the Tulsa area, so you'll travel east.
Oh, yeah. I know where that is.
Then back around in there. Small town, but they love football.
Yeah, I got to come visit sometime.
Yeah, do that, man. Do that.
I've got there's a high school reunion in like 6 weeks, I think, in Dallas. It's the 30th. So I don't know if I'm going to be able to go, but I'm going to maybe try. And if I do, I'm definitely going to, I'll try to, hook up with you guys.
Yeah, please do, man. Please do. And hey, feel free to stay here with us.
No, I appreciate that. I might hit you up on that depending on where everything is and how long. I mean, it should be, a real fairly short trip, but
okay.
Well, yeah, thanks. So we were talking before, not our last live stream, but before or between then and now about what we should talk about. And I think, was it you that came up with feminism? We were talking about a few different things.
Yeah, just based on the comment that one of the viewers had, speaking of feminism and how he felt. Now, this is what I gather from the comment. He felt as though the reason men are not being more responsible is because of this movement called feminism, and that women are more independent now, and I guess not needing men to the degree that we should be taking responsibility for our actions.
Right. Well, yeah, I can definitely see how that affects the thinking of men, because you've got women on one end of the spectrum, and that even in that spectrum, there's a spectrum of what they think a man's role is or is not in their lives, right?
Right.
So, I mean, have you seen anything around this? I mean, have you bumped up against that, or in talking to your group, is there something where these guys are bringing up maybe these points and not calling it feminism, but it's showing up in other ways?
I think, are you familiar with the Me Too movement?
Yeah.
So I think with the uprise of the Me Too movement, not that all of a sudden this has happened, but I think with the rise of the Me Too movement, maybe men are feeling a little scared, a little skeptical now that women are voicing their opinions, which should have always been the case. I think that since we live in a patriarchal type society, for the longest, we have suppressed women and their voice to speak up, their skills to do certain things or to do the same things that men do. So I think now with this uprising of women coming to the forefront and expressing their feelings of how they have been harassed, verbally and sexually, I think men are maybe becoming a little skeptical about taking responsibility for things.
Well, what do you mean taking responsibility? Because you're saying they're too afraid of the backlash of what? I mean, what is responsibility?
I think if we, from the beginning, had we allowed women to have a voice, have a say in what's going on, we would have captured from the beginning these abuses that are happening to women now
Right.
in the workplace,
Agreed.
in a
Gotcha.
marriage, just in society in general.
Right. Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. I think there's been a right when you're really suppressive of somebody of a group in society, and then you turn around and they get their rights, in this case women's rights, and that had to come through in waves, right? There it was 1848 when the women's suffrage uh, began, and it took a while till 1920 when they could
Mm-hmm.
vote,
Yeah.
and then it took a long time, and then you had the second wave of women's rights in the 1960s. 1963, I think, is when it started, and so you're not even like giving them everything. It's been still a slow, drawn out process, and I think there's resentment there, and I think there's also just a backlash. But I don't think everybody feels that way. I also think that's feminism. If we think of the more extreme side of that, is a smaller minority that gets a big platform.
Yeah. So I agree with what you're saying, but I think it even goes further back than 1848 with the suffrage movement, as you're talking about, that happened in July of 1800s in Seneca, New York. So we have to look at what happened then and see that even at that point, when it became known to us or became this national worldwide event, things had been happening prior to that.
Mm-hmm.
So if we go back to biblical times and we look at what happened in the Garden of Eden, when Adam and Eve had responsibilities for the way the garden was supposed to be ran and things they could not do. Now, just based biblically on what I've read, I don't believe that Adam really gave enough knowledge to Eve prior to eating that fruit. I think he may have mentioned that. And I believe that still today, men are not as responsible in uh, educating our wives about certain things or giving them the freedom to do certain
Well, hold
things.
on. Let me stop you right there. So
Uh,
that sounds a little
that opens up a can of worms,
right.
huh?
Right, because you're saying women aren't educating men, and I don't know what that means. So I don't actually have an opinion until I ask your opinion. But I know some people, women would hear that, or anybody would hear that, or not anybody, but some people, male or female, would hear that, and then go take that to the extreme. Like, who the hell are you to tell me? Teach me or let me know information. So what do you mean by that?
Okay, so let's use this word education. It means a lack of knowledge. So to educate you means I'm going to give you the knowledge you need to make it in this society or in this environment or this community that we're in.
Mm-hmm.
So when we look back at biblical times, there was information that Adam had to give to Eve, and while Eve did not follow those instructions, we have to think about, well, did Adam fully communicate to her what was supposed to be done, or did he just was it just a tongue-in-cheek type situation? Well, we're not supposed to eat of that tree, and that's it. Because
Okay,
when you
but
read the
modern times, how
so in modern times, let's take it to modern times, with women not being able to speak what's on their mind when they were told you should be pretty,
mm-hmm.
have babies, work in the kitchen. That's it. Now, I think if we as men would better communicate to them the way the world is working and how they can best fit inside this patriarchal community or society that we have, I think that we would have never had this suffrage that women had to go through because of men not. Well, the problem is that men have. What's the word I'm looking for? Men have um, objectified women. That's what I'm
Mm-hmm.
saying. That's what I'm looking for.
Right. And I agree with some of what you're saying, but I'm not clear on others because it sounds kind of sexist, meaning men are withholding. What information are they withholding?
I don't think we're holding information as much as it's like with you and your kids. your responsibility is to educate your kids and train them and teach them the ways of the world,
Are you saying
what to
that's what we should
expect.
do to women?
And I'm saying we need to do that to women, but I'm saying with it, and let me specify, I'm speaking within the confines of a marriage, not
Uh-huh.
just women in
Well,
general. It's
no,
within
yeah,
the,
I assume that's what it was. You're not just walking down
yeah.
the street.
Well, within the confines of a marriage, I believe that it is our responsibility as men to include our wives in what's going on. I think it's our
So what does
responsibility
that
to allow them
mean?
to grow.
What's going on?
Yeah, allow them to know what's going on and not suppress them, not keep them where they are, and not withhold information from them. There was a time um, when I think it was like during the '60s when women had to report all the monies that they made. It
Mm-hmm.
was given to the man. He was responsible for the monies. He was responsible for bringing home the bacon. He was responsible for the maintaining of everything that happened within that
Mm-hmm.
family. And she was pretty much just told to stay home, look pretty, speak when spoken to, or unless I tell you to do something, and go with it from that. And
Mm-hmm.
we've abused our responsibility as being head or leader within the family. We've usurped our authority and made the woman a
Okay, so
servant.
is your premise that the man is the head of the household, and in the sense of his word is final, or how does that work, or what does that look
Oh,
like to
I
you?
say that's a good point there,
Because
because a lot of people.
I think I know what you're saying, but the way
Mhm.
you're saying it to me anyway sounds like there's a hierarchy, and you did use that word of male and female. Like the man is
Mhm.
up here, and he's disseminating some ethereal information from the universe or his job or whatever it may be to the woman, and he prevents that flow, or he's the gatekeeper of that information. I see it as um, he's his own unit, she's her own unit. And if I hear what you're saying, or if we maybe agree on putting it this way, that he's responsible for including her in his world, in his bubble, right? Is
Mhm.
that more along the lines?
Yeah. So there is no hierarchy when it comes to a marriage.
Okay.
There is no hierarchy. The man is the leader of that relationship. He is the head of household, but that doesn't make him above the woman. He is still equal. It's a co-partnership that's there. So they need to share what's going on within that family, within that unit.
Yeah, I mean, I know your wife. I couldn't imagine her being submissive to you, and I don't mean that in any other way than she's her own person.
Yeah, and you can still be your own person within the marriage. I'm not saying that now that you are married, the buck stops with the husband. His word is final. That is not true. Now you're you're going back into that patriarchal
Right.
society where everything that the man say goes, and I don't care what any other person has to say. My word is law, and
Okay.
I don't think it was ever meant to be that way. But that's the way it happened as we began to come into uh, our own way of thinking, our own way of doing things.
Okay. So I think there's also, and maybe you were touching on this, when speaking to your children or teaching your children, right? So when you're teaching your daughters, you're teaching them to that you do have. So in that instance, I understand the dissemination of information, the teaching, the training of daughters, so that they are able to understand that there's going to be people out in this world, men, that are going to try to keep them down, so to speak. And then on the flip side, if you're raising boys, men, you're going to teach them that you don't do this, that they have equal value, and basically, you know, are what we're talking about right now in the means of how they need to act.
Yeah. So at some point, um, women were told by men or by their husbands that they had a certain role to play.
Mm-hmm.
And so they were stuck inside that role. And men never did allow them to rise to the surface,
Right.
be their own person. We never did allow that to happen. And at some point, some woman spoke up against society
Mm-hmm.
and probably said to her husband, if she were married, I think we were talking about the suffrage earlier. I think Lucretia Moulton, I think, is the woman that you're talking about. I'm not sure. I know the
It
last
may
name
have
was
been.
Moulton. Huh?
It may have been. I don't
Yeah.
remember.
So I think at some point she said to her husband, or she decided within her own rights of reasoning things out, that it's not right. I should be able to do the things that fulfill me when it comes to work. I have a voice. I have an opinion. I have rights. Um, so this declaration of sentiments that they wrote during the suffrage time was exactly like the Declaration of Independence that we have today. It says, we hold these truths to be self-evident that all men are created equal. So when the suffrage began to happen, they created a declaration of sentiments saying the same thing. We hold these truths to be self-evident that all men and women are created equal.
Right.
And we all have these unalienable rights. We should have the right to vote. We should have the right to speak up. We should have the right to do the things that are going to help us fulfill and enjoy this life
Right.
of liberty that we have.
Well, yeah. So if you fast forward though to now, so you said something where women have the right to fulfill their work lives, stuff like that. I agree with all that, but what do you do when children come into play? I mean, obviously, to start with, the women have to carry the children. That's kind of a biological fact. There's no getting around that. Once the child is born, what's your opinion that should take place in the carrying of the child?
Just as I believe that marriage is a co-partnership, I believe that the raising of children is a co-partnership.
Okay.
So I don't believe that once the children come into the world, the man should say, okay, so now that's your responsibility. They're girls, it's your responsibility. If they were boys, that would be my responsibility. I don't agree with that. I think there's an imbalance that's there.
Right.
And if we continue to separate it that way, then we're going to have these kids who grow up and be unproductive in society because they're thinking, well, this is a man's world and women aren't capable of doing the things that we want to do. And it's all
Right.
because we have
But what do
instilled
you
in them.
let me interrupt. What do you do though when you've got a situation where the child comes in to this world and both parents are going to work? Are you okay with that? Or do you see an issue with that?
Well, it depends on again, it's a co-partnership. It depends on what they have spoke about.
Mm-hmm.
If I'm going to, as a pastor, if I'm going to do a wedding, I'm going to do some premarital counseling with that couple, and I'm going to ask them these questions. So as you guys are coming together, who do you think has the sole responsibility of raising the kids?
Mm-hmm.
And if the husband says, I believe it's the woman, then I'm going to ask the woman, do you agree with that? Yeah, that's what we've talked about, and I want that responsibility. Okay, they have both agreed that that's the way it's going to go. You can't argue with that because that's an agreement the two of them came to based on conversations.
But there's feminists out there that think that's just, even if it's agreed to, is not a good idea.
Well,
they think you just put the kid in daycare, and that's really where I'm getting at. I mean, do you think the child should be just born, thrown into somebody else's care, and the two parents go to work? I'm looking more for your opinion because I think the premarital is awesome. More people should do it. I wish I would have done that. So I'm a big believer in that.
Yeah. So my opinion is that I would like for and my wife did do this. She stayed home for the kids during those primary years.
Mm-hmm.
And I said to her when we got married, I said, look, I would love for you to stay home and take care of the kids, but she had a job at the time.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, I don't mind you continuing on to work in this job, but when the kids come, I'd like for you to stay home and take care of the kids. I'm going to help out as well. I want my kids to have those primary years of their mom or their dad being there. Right. And then when it's time to go to school, we prepare them to go out and be a part of society.
Right.
But that's just my opinion. However, if couples disagree with that, if some feminist woman says, well, I don't agree with that, I think I should just put them in daycare. Well, that's fine if that's what you and your husband have agreed upon.
Well, see, that's where then you and I part ways, because if I'm looking out for the best interest of the child, if the whole point, or at least a big part of the point of what we're doing here is for the next generation and the next generation to have these discussions about really what it takes to be successful in society and be successful as a man from our point of view, then we are, or in my opinion, you've got to start when they're kids. And starting when they're with their kids, it means that you have to understand the development, the psychological development of a child being born and raised in a environment where a parent, male or female, is there for that child for its primary, years in development versus somebody else raising it. And I've heard people say, well, it's fine. Oh, it's great. No, I remember speaking to one person, I'm like, well, they don't love your child all day. And she goes, oh yeah, no, it's great. They do this and they do that and everything. But you're never going to get as much attention from a caregiver as you are from your parent. Okay. I mean, that's just what I believe. And there's kind of scientific, studies behind that.
I can see that perspective. So let's go back to this word education that we were speaking of. So do you trust that teachers are going to love and care for your kids the way that they should and educating them in the school system?
No.
You don't trust that they're going to do that, but yet you still put them in.
Well, it depends on what you're saying. Are they going to love them and care for them as much as I would? No. But there's a trade-off because they're ultimately more qualified to teach than I am.
And that's
but we're talking about children before they go into kindergarten, where it's really they're forming their bonds with their parents. They're getting that love and attention, all day long. They're forming these attachment bonds. Mm-hmm. And, if you don't take care of a child and you don't fulfill those needs as a child, that is going to come back later on in the form of bad relationships, in the form of bad self-esteem. Not always and not every case. This isn't something that it's an all or nothing, but you're going to affect that child's well-being growing up. And
go
ahead.
I get that. Good parenting skills are going to involve both parents being involved from the time the child is born up until they have made a decision equally that he or she may go to daycare. And I'm saying that with those good parenting skills, they are going to check out and make sure that wherever my son or daughter is going to be during a portion of their primary years, I need to make sure that person is well educated.
Right, but I know what you're saying, but I'm talking about more than that. I'm talking about, so if we're confining it to from when they're born to before kindergarten, are we agreeing in that area?
Mm-hmm, yes.
Because once they start reaching a certain age, it is time to start learning, scholastically and stuff like that. And yeah, you got to put them in schools, and I get all that. But between that time, if you're going to put them in daycare, because that's the word you used, it's daycare. Mm-hmm. It doesn't matter how smart I am and how well I've researched and I've got the best of the best. No one's going to love my child better than me. No one's going to care. No one's going to, have the intention, the understanding, and not to mention I'm missing out on my child. I'm missing out on knowing my child, understanding my child, and learning about my child, learning about me. I don't even know where to begin on the value of doing that and the disservice you do to your child by going the other route. I mean, you might as well say, well, I'll hire someone to have sex with my your husband, because, I researched them and they're real good, right? They're real good. They're even better in this one area of sex than me. So I'm going to hire this person to go have sex with my husband. So why do you think that's a good thing to do?
No, I don't.
Right. So, for obvious reasons, right?
Right.
Okay. Right. Well, I think I would not want to hire someone to raise my child in a given amount of time, or this certain time over here, to raise my child for the same obvious but different reasons. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense. So in the beginning, when you asked me this question, you said, what is your opinion on this? Mm-hmm. And so I voiced my opinion about this. And then I said, now for those who may have a feminist point of view and think that, well, I don't want my kid being raised by anyone out of daycare. That's fine. There is nothing wrong with you staying home and raising that kid. Now, there are
right. I'm sorry. Let me interrupt real quick, because I'm just trying to gauge you, and we don't talk outside of these. So I'm trying to understand where you lie on that line. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
where are your values and my values? So that's partly of why I'm asking these questions. Sorry, go ahead.
My values are that I would love for my wife to stay home and raise the kids. And then I do all the work because now the kids are going to get everything that they need. However, there are situations where couples are not able to do that. They're not able to make it, or they're barely making with two incomes coming in as opposed to just one income coming in. Okay, so they have to go back to work just because of the stress and strain of the financials.
Right, and this is not, when I say this is an optimum idea. This is not, or this is excusing, obviously, there's single parents out there that have no other choice. And then when it gets to a two-income family, like what you're speaking about, that can start to get a little more dicey because it depends, right? I've seen people, drive up in their fancy cars and dropping off the kids, going off to work to have a fancy car and a fancy house. But it's about raising, someone else is raising the kid.
Right.
It's the emphasis is on making money, living in a big place, as opposed to how great of a job can I do as being a child. And I think part of that on the feminist side of things has been a backlash against everything we were talking about earlier, where they had to come from such a long point of suffrage all the way to, where we are today. And I think but I think just kind of in general, it's like eating, right? You've recently gone through a health kick, right? So
Yes.
you learned about nutrition. You learned more about what to do and the right way to do things that resulted in a fitter you. I think kind of in general.
What did you say? What did you say?
A fitter you.
Oh, fitter. I thought you said a bitter you. I was like, dude, what
No,
about
no,
me?
no, no.
Like I'm bitter.
No.
Okay.
You're a sweet
Bitter
guy.
you.
You're too sweet to be bitter. But I think there's that same thing where, you've got Google, you've got all the obviousness or all the ability to get all the information out there, and people don't. They drink sodas all day. They drink diet sodas. They do this, they do that. They eat food that's not bad or good for them. And I don't mean, okay, I went to a party and had something. I'm talking about I'm just eating McDonald's all day and all night. Well, we kind of know that's not the best for you. But there's, just as you can go out there and get that information, just as you can then therefore go find out information on raising children. I read a book called The Whole Brain Child and other things along those lines of the development of the child's brain. And there's enormous amounts of data out there and opinions. You'll get on both sides, but there's a lot of good articles that are like why you should raise your child and not offload that to somebody else. And again, this is all assuming you're capable of doing that, right? This isn't like, right, well, I'm divorced, my husband left me, or my wife left me, and I get it. I totally get it. And that stinks. You're not a bad person. You're doing the best you can. And the fact that you're raising them and doing the best that you can, and someone's there caring for them, I think that's phenomenal. I'm talking about when the situation allows for that should be kind of the priority for the child. Even if the husband stays home, it doesn't matter.
So
we could talk about that dynamic.
Are you suggesting that if there is not a financial crisis or burden within the family, then parents should decide who's going to stay home and raise that kid during their
damn right.
Okay.
Because otherwise, these
Again,
kids get. But I'm looking at data and I'm looking at the information and I'm forming my opinion based upon that and knowing how the mind works and the connections that are made early on in stage, and how if that's not there, these children grow up to go out into society and create a more difficult society to deal with, to work within, right? We watch news all day of people doing bad things, and I don't mean, the sociopath, psychopath, murderer, even though, yes, we see that, but all these other things. We're watching the Jerry Springers, right? We're watching all these shows of just people behaving badly. We're watching videos. You go to YouTube, you can see somebody that gets hit by a car, and people are just walking by this guy as he lays on the ground, or woman.
Yeah.
And what is going on in society where people look at that and just ignore that? And I think a lot of that comes from the culture that you're raised in within the family dynamic. And, having a father there, not having a father there, having a mother, not having a mother, and even when you get them there, doesn't mean they're raising, their thinking is right. And that's kind of the purpose of you and me doing this, is because it's talking about how men should act. And so I think if you're a man and you want to raise a family, like you said, you got to think this out ahead of time. You definitely got to be talking about this. I mean, this should be I'm interviewing somebody else doing a live stream in a while called Truth in Dating. She's an author, Susan Campbell, and she's like, within the first or two dates, you should be talking about things in life and what you want, because there's no sense in wasting time if, let's be dramatic here, I want kids and you hate kids. Right?
Then in that situation there, this is where we're going back to this word about communication again within a relationship. If you're communicating to a person that you want kids, or the person says that they don't want kids, then you need to decide, is this the type of relationship I want to be in?
Right.
These questions should be asked prior to that relationship getting to become serious now, because it's not just lives that are going to be involved. There's emotions that are involved in all of this. So there should be wide open communication. And I believe that from the beginning, the reason we've had problems with as I said earlier, women not being able to speak up and have a voice and be who they can be is because men have not communicated to them properly. Hey, I love you. We are equal partners in this relationship. And whatever you think is good to make us strong together, then I'm saying to you, then you go out and do those things. I'm not, and it's not like she has to get his permission.
Right.
And he's not giving permission.
He's supporting
the talking decision. Things through.
Yeah. Okay.
So,
go ahead.
So going back to you saying earlier about, if financially they're able, they should stay home. I'm in agreement with that. If financially they can do that, they should stay home. But if the female says, oh, I don't want to stay home, even though that we're financially capable of doing that, I don't want to stay home, why don't you stay home? Then the husband has to decide, well, what am I going to do here? As the leader of this family, what decision am I going to make? And I want to continue to work. She wants to continue to work. So maybe we should just try to find a family member that can stay here with us, or hire a nanny.
Well, what is the point of having kids?
Talked and worked out.
What's the point of having kids?
What's the plan of having kids?
The point. Like, what's the point of having kids if the daily raising of that child is offloaded to someone else? Yeah. Is it status? Is it I just got to procreate and I don't know what's going on? I think that being a parent is the most important job in the world.
I agree. Now, I don't know the answer to that question that you had. What's the reason for having kids? I can't answer that. I can give you my own personal opinion, but I can't give an answer that's going to suffice the general public. So
that's more.
I will say this.
Go ahead.
I will say this. Being raised the way that I was raised, I want to have kids. I was raised in a very loving family, so I was led to believe that I would be a good father, and here's how you are going to model being a good father, because my dad did that. Now, there may be other people who didn't have the same upbringing that I did, and because of that, they don't want to have kids. But we're expected to procreate if we can do that.
Are you talking about from a biblical sense?
Say what?
Are you talking about from a biblical sense, or just
in a biblical sense? Yeah, in a biblical sense, we're designed to procreate.
Well, right. I don't think there's any
in a biblical sense. We're not saying that you must do that. This is a commandment. Go out. The Bible does say that Adam and Eve were fruitful and they multiplied the earth as husband and wife. So if you are a married couple, you're going to have sex, and there's a 99.9% chance that kids are going to happen if this is going on. So the purpose of having kids is to procreate and keep filling the earth with people. Yeah. That's my opinion.
Yeah. I think the answer is you've got to ask yourself why you want children. And I think it's okay to have an opinion and draw some maybe lines in the sand that if you really think that through, why am I having children? Because I think sometimes a lot of us don't. I think because it is biological and built into us that it just kind of happens. I know that's what happened for me. I wanted children, but I never thought about why. And I think if we think a little bit more about that and spend as much time designing that as we would our careers, our house, our just going on a trip somewhere, putting as much thought into why do I want a child? What's the goal here? And then if this is the goal, let's say the goal is, because I can't imagine people going, well, I want to raise a child so they can be dysfunctional in society, be a burden on society, get strung out on drugs, right? I mean, let's just cut to the chase. No one's going to say that. They're going to say, well, I want to raise a productive member of society. And whatever way they're happy, they do their own thing. Okay, well, then you've got to reverse engineer that and go, how do I do that? And you've got to look and study into, how are children born? Or not how they're born, but how once they're born, how do they develop? How does the programming, because that's basically what happens, what does that look like that goes into that to make that child ultimately, a healthy, happy member of society? And I'm leaving that very loose, though, when I say that, because, you can be an artist, you could be a carpenter, you could be a singer, you could be whatever. Doesn't matter. There's no right or wrong there. You are who you are. But how do you offer the best possible opportunity for that outcome? And I don't ever hear that discussion. I don't hear people talking like that, right?
No.
Do you ever hear that? It's like,
no,
you want kids? You want kids? Okay, who's going to stay home? Okay, you're lucky if you can get that.
Yeah. Again, that's a good point that you bring up. That should be discussed. Why do we want to have kids? There are people who have kids and they shouldn't have kids.
Right.
That's why we have those kids who don't have a mom and dad around, or they're given up for adoption. I'm not speaking against adoption, but those people who have given up their babies for adoption, they probably shouldn't have never had a kid to begin with, because they're thinking, I don't know how to raise this kid.
Right.
But at least
it takes a lot of guts to do that, by the way.
Say that again.
It takes a lot of guts, in my opinion, to give a child up for adoption.
I think that's a very bold move for that parent to make, to say, I'm not capable of raising this kid, so let me do the best that I can for them now by giving them to someone that can do that.
Yeah.
So I'm not against it. I'm not against adoption. I'm all for that. But that's just proving my point that some people shouldn't have kids, because they're missing out on something very valuable here by doing that, by giving the kid up. You're already creating within that kid a sense of discontent within their lives, especially if that family that they were given to does not teach them and communicate to them that the reason you look a little different from us, the reason you don't act a lot like we do, is because we came from different families. Mm-hmm. You're black, I'm white. Here's the reason why. When you were born, your mom wasn't able to raise you the way that she thought was best for you, so we came along, we started raising you.
Right.
And if you haven't shown that kid love, and you just constantly make that kid think that, well, we've been knowing you since the day you were born, and he has no idea about his other mom, that's going to cause a lot of problems for that kid.
Right, but that goes in line with what I'm saying. If you have your own child, even, and then you hand them off to somebody else, you don't think the child's going to be like, why can't I be with you? Why?
Well, yeah.
And how many people you hear women go, or anybody, male, female, well, but they get socialized and they play with the other kids and they do all this stuff, because I've been told that. It's like, really? Have you ever seen 2-year-olds? They throw crap at each other and hit each other. And there's some interaction, but there's nothing you couldn't get from that by taking them to the park. And do I mean that, I don't know, once a week you had somebody, a friend or whatever, even a service, watch them for 2 or 3 hours while you went and did something? I don't think that's horrible. I'm talking about 5 days a week, so for 8+ hours, someone else is raising your kid. I mean, I feel bad for that child. I feel really bad. And unfortunately, this view seems to be unpopular. Even though it's happening all over the place, people aren't actually talking about it. And I think this goes back to our topic, because feminism, the extreme side of that, I think feminism in general is good, that caused all these changes to happen. Let's be very clear here. I think having,
Absolutely.
you know,
Yeah.
the right to vote and all that is a no-brainer for me. Coming into the family and having the wife and the husband, a team and equally yoked, right? I believe in all that. I think the decisions should be made in unison and agreed upon. But I think once you know, you get to children and have these children that are being raised without the real thought that's going into that, and not being able to impart your values into this child to the extent that somebody else is having an effect on them because they're spending, you know, 8 hours a day with this child. Not to mention, it's not a one-on-one. Even if there's 4 or 5 kids per one caretaker, you can at any given time give them attention, and they're all going to kind of need different stuff.
Yeah.
Or have
Yeah.
different needs at a different time.
Yeah. For sake of the topic, with me saying that I wanted my wife to stay home and raise the kids, for sake of the topic, that was not me usurping my authority or trying to get her to stay put in her place. That was not it. We both agreed that that was a good thing to have. My worst to her was, once we got married, my worst to her was, if ever you leave this job that you had prior to us getting together, I want you to work for yourself as opposed to working for anyone else. And now she has her own business, but I was all about her either working for herself, or, since I'm in ministry, working at a church. But I did not want her going out into the world and working another job that would take away from her being who she wanted to be and take away from her being able to be here with the family. But I communicated that to her in a way that she understood and felt like she was still a whole woman and felt like she could still do the things that she wanted to do. She knows that she has the freedom to do anything, not because I granted her that freedom, but because I've allowed her to see that together we are partners in this relationship. This is not, this is a marriage of Gary Cooper.
It is weird to hear you, though, to say I allowed her to see. I mean, I have to push back that when you use those words, because I believe words are important. Like, I mean, it sounds kind of condescending and usurpous of the relationship. You know, I allowed her. I'm just pointing this out.
Yeah, I appreciate that. So let me use a different word instead of saying allowed. In our communications with one another, she understood that I had her best interests at heart, and that I was not going to do anything to make her feel less than anything else, that she was going to be equal with me.
Well, that you support her, basically. Whatever she ends up doing, you support her.
I support her.
Assuming it's not, illegal.
Yeah. and that's a key ingredient to any relationship. There has to be support, and not just in a marital relationship, but let's just take you and I. We have to support one another. While you may not believe the way that I believe, you support my beliefs. In other words, look, I'm not going to speak ill of how he believes because this is my friend. I'm going to support him. I'm going to be that. I'm not going to ridicule you for the way you believe because you're my friend. And so I'm going to speak highly of John Doe, and I don't believe that John Doe is going to speak unbecoming of me because of the fact that we value each other.
Well, no, we'll talk.
That needs to be done in a marriage.
Yeah, well, we would talk about these things, and therefore, just in a marriage, these things need to be discussed if there ever should be something between us. So, no, meaning I don't have a problem saying it. Like, hey, here's this and that. That's why, I've called you out a few times on this just for clarification. Not because I think you're a bad dude or coming from a bad place, because that would be a whole different story.
Yeah, my mind just went to another area when you said there's something between us. I thought there was some jungle fever going on there, so that's why I laughed.
Oh, Coop, I swear. You kill me, man. Well, with that, we're going to go ahead and call it, because it's 11:45, and I know you got an appointment.
Okay.
So we'll keep working on this.
All right, sounds good, man. As always, it's good talking with you, man. We'll talk again about what's happening next.
All right, Coop. Thanks. I appreciate everything. Have a great rest of your Sunday.
We'll talk again.
All right. Bye.